I'm Angeline Chica from BSHM 1104, and I just want to share you something about risk and hazard and how to eliminate hazard for the hospitality industry. Many people confuse about hazard and risk, so let's discuss about the difference about risk and hazard. So first of all, what hazard does means?
Hazard, it is something with the potential to cause harm or it is a source of danger. Hazard can take many forms. It could be an object, a substance, an energy source, or even an existing work, practice, or process.
Example of hazards could be such things as substances such as harmful chemicals, energy sources such as machinery with moving objects or moving parts, work practices such as working at height with or from a ladder or lifting and moving materials or objects. On the other hand, if we had identified the potential for harm or the hazard and put suitable and simple control measures in place, such as barriers, the chances of someone coming to harm or the risk would be now low.
So another information about hazard prevention, control where we are in the workplace. Effective control protect workers from workplace hazards to help injuries, illnesses, and incidents, minimize or eliminate safety and health risks, and also to help employers to provide workers with safe and healthful working conditions. To effectively control and prevent hazards, employers or they should be involved workers who often have the best understanding of the conditions that create hazards and insights how they can be controlled. And the second one, identify and evaluate options for controlling hazards using a hierarchy controls. The third one, develop plans with measures to protect workers during emergencies and non-routine activities. And the last one, evaluate the effectiveness of existing controls to determine whether they continue to provide protection or whether different controls may be more effective, and review new technologies for their potential to be more protective, more reliable, or less costly. There are 6 ways or 6 action items to control the hazard. The 6 action to control the hazard and how to accomplish it. So the first one is action item 1, identify control hazards. A wealth of information exists to help employers or to us to investigate options for controlling identified hazards. Before selecting and control options, it is essential to solicit workers' input on their feasibility and effectiveness. So, how to accomplish it? Collect, organize, and review information with workers to determine what types of hazards may be present and which workers may be exposed or potentially exposed. Information available in the workplace may include review sources such as OSHA and standards and guidance, industry consensus standards, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health or NIOSH, publications, manufacturers, literature, and engineering reports to identify potential control measures, and keep current or relevant information from trade or professional associations. Investigate control measures used in the workplace and determine whether they would be effective at your workplace. Get input from workers who may be able to suggest and evaluate solutions based on their knowledge of the facility, equipment, and work processes. For complex hazards, consult with the safety and health experts, including OSHAS on-site consultation program. Action item 2, select controls. Select controls, employers should select the controls that are the most feasible, effective, and permanent. In elimination, for hierarchy of controls, it is basically remove the hazard. For substitution, it is the replace the hazard. For engineering controls, it is isolate people from the hazard. And administrative controls, change the way people work. And for the last, PPE, protect the worker with personal protective equipment. So how to accomplish it? Eliminate or control all serious hazards or hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm immediately. Use item controls while you develop and implement longer-term solutions. Select controls according to the hierarchy that emphasizes engineering solutions or including elimination or substitution. First, follow the safe work practices, administrative controls, and finally, personal protective equipment. Avoid selecting controls that may directly or indirectly introduce new hazards. Example, include exhausting contaminated air into occupied workspaces or using hearing protection that makes it difficult to hear backup alarms. Review and discuss control options with workers or to the other people to ensure that controls are feasible and effective. Use a combination of control options when no single method fully protects workers. For action item 3, develop and update a hazard control plan. A hazard control plan describes how the selected controls will be implemented. An effective plan will address serious hazards first. Interim controls may be necessary, but the overall goal is to ensure effective long-term control of hazards. It is important to track progress towards completing the control plan and periodically or at least annually, and when conditions, processes or equipment change, verify that controls remain effective. So, how to accomplish it or how to achieve it? First, list the hazard needing controls in order of priority. Second, assign responsibility for installing or implementing the controls to a specific person or persons with the power or ability to implement the controls. Third, establish a target completion date. Fourth, plan how you will track progress toward completion. And the last, plan how you will verify the effectiveness of controls after they are installed or implemented. Action item 4. Select controls to protect workers during non-routine operation and emergencies. The hazard control plan should include provisions to protect workers during non-routine operations and foreseeable emergencies depending on your workplace. This could include fires and explosions, chemical releases, hazardous material spills, unplanned equipment or shutdown, infrequent maintenance activities, natural and weather disasters, workplace violence, terrorist or criminal attacks, disease outbreaks, this pandemic or the influenza, or medical emergencies. Non-routine tasks or task workers don't normally do should be approached with particular caution. Prior to initiating such work, review job hazard analysis and job safety analysis with any workers involved and notify others about the nature of the work schedule, and any necessary precautions. So, how to achieve it or how to accomplish it? First, develop procedures to control hazards that may arise during non-routine operations, or, for example, removing machine guarding during maintenance and repair. The second one, develop or modify plans to control hazards that may arise in emergency situations. The third one, procure any equipment needed to control emergency-related hazard. And fourth, assign responsibilities for implementing the emergency plan. And last, conducting emergency drills to ensure that procedures and equipment to provide adequate protection during emergency situations. Action item 5. Implement selected controls in the workplace. Once hazards prevention and control measures have been identified, they should be implemented according to the hazard control plan. How to accomplish it and how to achieve it. The first thing to do, implement hazard control measures according to the priorities established in the hazard control plan. The second one, when resources are limited, implement the measures on a first basis according to the hazard ranking priorities or the risk established during hazard identification and assessment. Or however, that regardless of limited resources, employers or we have an obligation to protect the other people from recognized serious hazards. And last, promptly implement any measures that are easy and inexpensive. For example, the general housekeeping, removal of used tripping hazards such as electrical cords, basic lighting, or regardless of the level of hazard they involve. And the last action, item 6, follow up to confirm that controls are effective. To ensure that controls measures are and remain effective, employers or we should track progress in implementing controls, inspect and evaluate controls once they are installed, and follow routine preventive maintenance practices. So, how to achieve it or how to accomplish it? Conduct regular inspections and industrial hygiene monitoring if indicated to confirm that engineering controls are operating as designed, or evaluate control measures to determine if they are effective or need to be modified. Involve workers if the evaluation of the controls, if controls are not effective, identify, select, and implement further control measures that will provide adequate protection. So, confirm that work practices, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment or PPE use policies are being followed. And for the last two is conduct routine preventive maintenance of equipment, facilities, and controls to help prevent incidents due to equipment failure. So, let's move on about the risk.
Risk is the chance or probability that a person will be harmed or experience an adverse health effect if exposed to a hazard.
Also, risk is the likelihood of person being injured or receiving an adverse health effect due to a hazard. To help us understand and how to control risk, we first need to look at the various ways that we can do it. So, when we consider the degree of risk that a hazard possesses to ourselves, they must bear in mind the following factors that can influence risk: the frequency of exposure, the route of exposure, and how severe the injury or adverse health effect of exposure is. So, as a person, it's our responsibility to determine the hazards and measure the risk and install controls to protect ourselves.
To control workplace risk, they could consider using a less hazardous process or substituting in a less hazardous chemical. Next, stop workers accessing the hazardous activity, process, or substance. Third, personal protective equipment or PPE should only be used as a last resort when all other controls have been exhausted. Ensure they have adequate first aid and washing facilities available, and communicate with other people and consider their thoughts and advice in control measures. Controlling the risk. As part of the hospitality industry, they must control the risk in our workplace. To do that, they need to think about what might cause harm to people and decide whether if they are taking reasonable steps to prevent the harm. So, the first thing to do is identify the hazard, assess the risk level of risk each hazard identified, control the risk to reduce the harm and its severity, and fourth, reassess the level of risk for each hazard, and last, review and monitor that controls are working and risk level are acceptable.
So the first one is identify. Identify or work around your workplace with a worker and or subordinator or subcontractor, and identify what could seriously harm or what could seriously harm that the death or safety or the health or safety of workers and others. Remember to consider both immediate safety hazards such as falls and gradual health hazard like asbestosis. So the second one is assess. Once you have identified the hazard, assess the level risk for age. Assess the level of risk for age. This is a great time to talk to your workers, as they are your greatest source of information during the risk assessment process. They know and understand the jobs on how they can suffer potential harm and the controls that are or are not working. So the third one is control. Once you have identified the level of risk, you must do what is reasonable and practical to eliminate it. Where it can be eliminated, minimize it by choosing the best controls for the situations. The better the control, the lower the risk. Common controls such as codes of practice, guidelines and standard procedures can be applied for common risks. Remember to talk to SABIS and anyone else on site about risk resulting from your work. And if you can't eliminate a common risk, then apply common control measures. Use a risk register to record your common hazards and control. If you can't eliminate a specified risk and it is covered by regulations or is high risk, apply the hierarchy of controls and the use of task analysis or a safe work method statement. So the fourth one is reassess. After putting controls in place, go back and reassess the level of risk. You may not always get your controls right the first time. If the new level of risk is still too high, go back and put different controls in place, then reassess. So the fifth one, review and monitor. You will need to review your controls regularly to ensure your planned controls are being used. Check that controls are effective. Ensure your risk level estimate is correct. Check in the work risk if controls are convenient and effective. And monitor exposure to health. And identify new or identified work activities and risk. And lastly, consider if stronger controls are now possible. So that's all, and I hope you understand the difference or how to eliminate the risk and hazard. Again, I am Angeline Chica from BSHM 1104. Thank you and God bless.